Hey watch friends, today we're going to take a look at the latest offering from the micro brand Zelos, and this is their Spearfish GMT. This one's going to be coming to their site soon. I don't have an exact date as of time of recording, but it should be within the next few days. That being said, this is actually a follow-up to the original Spearfish that we checked out previously. It was about a year back if you want to check that one out. That was a three-hander. This one, as you can see, is expanding that out to a four-hand in GMT function. Also, in case you missed it, as far as the packaging, did recently feature an unboxing. I'll have that link down in the description if you care to check that out. Excellent aluminum box, the warranty card, those kind of things. If you know the brand, you've probably already seen them. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get a better feel for this watch. We'll start things off with the specifications. As with all other Zelos, this comes with a 1-year warranty standard, but they have excellent customer service, so I've never found that to be an issue. The case, measured roughly from the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position, is coming in at 40 millimeters. The bezel does step down, and it's coming in at 39.2 millimeters. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is a nice wrist versatile 46.8 millimeters. The total thickness, this did kick up a good bit from the original Spearfish, which I'll have a review video coming of that as well, looking at the two versions as well as some other comparisons. But this is coming in at 13.4 millimeters. Still not particularly chunky, but definitely a noticeable increase. That is including this flat sapphire crystal, which again, just like the predecessor, does include an inner AR coating. The movement. This has changed up significantly from the prior with its LJP. This is actually coming with a Sellita SW330-2. That -2 is really important there because it comes with some nice enhancements over the -1, most notably the power reserve. Though it's going to be an automatic movement, it has all the features you'd expect: hacking, hand winding, higher beat, 28,800 beats per hour. The power reserve that I mentioned on this particular variant is going to be 56 hours for that. And as far as the GMT functionality, this is not a true GMT. It is what would be like an office GMT or what have you, so it jumps around there. As far as the water resistance, you can see at the 6 o'clock position, just like its predecessor, 200 meters or 20 atmospheres. As far as the weight, this is coming in almost identically. It's coming in at 147.6 grams, and that is sized to my 6.5 inch wrist. Alright, so with the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the actual watch itself. First, for the colors, there are 4 variants that are available in this drop, and only 500 total units across all 4 of them. This white one that we're looking at today has almost a silvery coloration that we'll explore further. There's also a meteorite with excellent blued accents, really attractive. There's the aventurine, which is always popular. And then there's a mustard yellow color, so it's a little bit of an orangish yellow. That's a really cool pattern and texture for that as well. As far as the texture, it's going to vary depending on what variant you get. On the one we're looking at today, which is what we'll explore most in depth, this has what I would describe as being kind of like a sunburst guilloche pattern. So it does radiate out from the center, but it is certainly not just a traditional sunburst. It definitely has a guilloche inlay in that depth that comes along with it. As I mentioned, this does have a silvery coloration, so despite the fact that they call this white, as we'll see when we look at this next to the prior Swordfish, it really does pick up, especially depending on the way the light is hitting it, a lot of depth and coloration to that beyond just a stark white dial. So I really think that's attractive, and I like that a lot. It has a similar dial layout as the previous model. You're going to have an applied logo at the 12 o'clock position. Then down at the 6 o'clock, you have Spearfish with the addition of GMT, and then you have an accent color, in this case, a nice light, like baby blue, that has your water resistance. That's going to carry over to the second hand as well, that we'll look at further with that coloration. Moving out to the perimeter, you can see that this does have the chapter ring that's printed on there, so you do have your nice hashes to be able to tell easily for precision legibility for your minutes and seconds. And then down at the 6 o'clock position, you once again have a beveled date window cutout. So nicely incorporated there. As far as the hardware, I previously described it as being somewhat of a Dauphine with a cathedral touch, and I think that's true again as well. It does have nice facets on the edges of the handset, and I think that looks excellent. But additionally, we'll talk about the coloration of this particular one as well. The polishing, it's going to look black a lot on camera because it does pick up the reflectivity of anything that's around it. However, I believe that this is just a standard silver, and it is very highly and nicely polished. The GMT hand, as we talked about, instead of being a second hand that's an accent color on the prior model, this one now carries over to the GMT with the second just keeping in line with the minute and hour for a nice differentiation there. The hands, particularly looking at the minute hand, it is slightly shorter than the prior version. I believe that that's to not obscure the GMT hand, but I did notice that in comparison to the original Spearfish. Shifting out to the markers are once again going to be faceted, and they're going to be trapezoids in shape. The size does, of course, differ. You have the largest being the cardinal at the 12 o'clock position, and then your 3 and your 9 o'clock are going to be large as well. The 6 is actually cut down because of the date window, and then the rest of them are going to be uniform. As I mentioned, we would revisit the coloration here. You can see that this particular variant actually features a light blue for its Lume application. And that is Lume applied to all of your hands as well as your bezel, your markers, etc. The application has actually been, in typical Zelos fashion, really good. I wasn't sure whether it would be a noticeable reduction with the light blue Lume compared to a C3 or a BGW9, but actually I found this performs pretty well on par with a BGW9, but it has the coloration, that light green coloration, that's closer to a C3, and I really can't tell that much of a difference as far as the usage, so excellent job there, great Lume, excellent endurance. Pleased with that. All right, shifting over to the bezel. This one, of course, with being a GMT, does change over. So instead of the 12-hour bezels, this now has a 24-hour bezel insert. This is still going to be 48 click and bidirectional. So let's check that out. As you can hear, it is not the stiffest in the world. However, it's actually plenty firm. It is noticeably stiffened up compared to the prior version. And as for the clicks, it clicks nice tactile feel for that. Very, very little play. I'm pleased with the action on that overall. This did change up now where you have a sapphire bezel insert, whereas they were previously ceramic, and I really like the effect of that. I think it classes up, especially with this fancier dial variant in the white here. I really think that classes that up a lot. The edge of this is going to be a noticeably thicker, but it's still a thick coin edge, so I should say taller, whereas this is still a thick coin edge for the actual milling there. In the action, like I said, it is definitely worlds better. It feels like a nice bearing mechanism in there. So great retention, especially for being bidirectional, because those are a lot of times harder to dial in than a unidirectional. Shifting out to the case, one of the things that does carry forward, and I'm very glad to see, is all of this is still going to be coated. So your bezel, your case, your bracelet, even your clasp is going to be coated with a hardened coating. So this, whereas it's 316L stainless steel, actually bumps up the scratch resistance to 1200 Vickers with that coating, which is really excellent there. And I want to keep this looking new longer, especially with the polished accents. As far as the actual case itself, you can see that it has, again, vertical brushing, so that's going to be a carryover as well. Very, very slim profile to the actual mid case itself, so that's an excellent touch. And part of that is the visual appearance of having these nice polished accents that you have running along the top and bottom. And again, it is a generous application there, just like with the prior version. It does have a subtle curvature to it. You can actually see the angles themselves are kind of relieved, or they're a little bit rounded, though it is still somewhat of an angular look. But the downturn lugs, they run right down to the case back, so that's an excellent touch there. Continuing out to the actual lugs themselves, you can see it has a much slimmer profile because of that facet cut on the inside as well as the outside. So it really helps to visually slim that down. So while it is a somewhat slim lug to begin with, that makes it seem even slimmer, and I think it's a really good look. I like that a lot. Shifting over to the crown side, you can see that there once again is an integrated crown guard. Nice swoop down for that. It doesn't keep with any kind of chunkiness there. It actually comes a little bit to a point, but without any sharpness. And I think visually, that's just a nice clean look and gives that dressier type of feel for that. So I really like that a lot. Speaking of the crown though, this once again is coming in at 6.4 millimeters. This is a screw down configuration. As you can see there, it is signed, but it does not have Lume as some other Zelos do. The grip on this is very, very easy. And I've actually found the movement, this was my first SW330 experience, movement winding, it is butter smooth. I can't feel anything happening with that. It is extremely, extremely smooth. So I don't know if this is a one-off or not, but I've been very, very impressed with that aspect of this. Everything feels very fluid, very nice. And then with the crown sticking out, like I said, very easy to grip a hold of. Nice milling in there that's somewhat reminiscent of the bezel, though a little bit of a tighter pattern. So great job there. Shifting over to the case back, just like with the predecessor, this does again have a screw-in case back. The finishing is going to be a circular brushing going around the perimeter. The main showcase, though, is going to be that exhibition window in the middle, and that really highlights and shows that gorgeous custom rotor. In this, of course, with having a different movement, this is also a much more stylized rotor than the prior version was. I like the subtle Geneva striping, love the skeletonization, the incorporation of the logo down at the 6 o'clock's a nice touch, and across the board, just very, very nice to look at. Enjoy that rotor quite a lot. And the whole case back, I think, looks pretty sharp. Not my favorite inlay. I do prefer keyholes as opposed to the cutouts on the perimeter, but otherwise, nice looking. All right, shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet, just like with the past version, is going to be a tapered bracelet. So you're coming from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. Once again, excellent carryover with the female end links. Very glad to see that. Also, the finishing is going to be the same as well, where you have brushing running down the links, and then on the exterior, the edges, you have the polish accents as well, which I really think, again, gives just that little bit of pop while still keeping a tool vibe. It is going to be held in with screws, which if you need a screwdriver, we'll have one link down in the description. We're nice, cheap, easy to change out there, so that's great. Do put a dab of Loctite on that when you change those around. The bracelet itself is held in with quick release spring bars, so it is nice and easy to change that around. As for the clasp, this clasp is actually going to be reminiscent of the Vitesse, and I apologize for my pronunciation there. I'm sure I'm still not getting that correct, but that's another Zelos model. This clasp is new to the Spearfish. It actually was a completely different version than we looked at on the Aurora. It was some of the past, like the Mako, and we'll look at that in comparison as well. But this has much more polishing accent down the middle, again with that hardened coating. Excellent touch there, and I'm glad to see that, so you can keep that polish looking new. It additionally has like a pebble inlay around the sign portion of the inner clasp, as well as brushing down the exterior as well. So that's really nicely done. It is a double pusher configuration, just like the prior variants are. Inside, it does have milling for your bridge. And one of the biggest and best things with this is, just like with the past versions, this is a different execution, but this does have a toeless micro adjust. So all you have to do with this one is you just pull that up and you can slide that out there. And let's get a look at what that end link looks like, or what that link looks like rather. As you can see, very natural look to it. I know this is one of the things people weren't as crazy about with the Aurora, so I think this is nicely incorporated there, but we'll talk about this further. So again, no button, just lift up, slide over, and you're all set, and that will lock into place there. There's little slots to catch that. So I think that's excellently done overall. And then the bracelet articulation. Bracelet articulation, just like on the past, is phenomenal. Check that out. Great drape, really, really easy. With that, folds flat, of course, to the back of the case. That feels so nice across the wrist. Really pleased with that touch again as well. And this is just like with the past version. All right, so now that we have a better feel for the watch itself, let's go ahead and check out some comps. We've talked a fair amount about the original Spearfish. Here it is just for a quick look. And again, I'll have another video, so I'm not going to go into too much depth on this. But then here's just to give you a preview of that side profile. You can see, especially at the bezel, definitely a noticeable difference. And then here, while we're looking at it, just the different style of clasp. Very different look there. And then the same thing is true with the actual dial finishing. Very different look, of course, full lume here, whereas it's not on this one. But that being said, it really has a different look on top of the accent colors. Here it is next to the Zelos Horizon. This is the GMT V2. And you can see here, very different look and very different execution for that, of course, box crystal, flat crystal, all those kinds of things. The list is too long to go on. But you can see this one is a little easier to track for 3 time zones because it does have a chapter ring, but that box edge kind of obscures that, so that makes it a little harder as well. But there's an idea just as far as sizing and to see how those two stack up. Both are stated as 40, but you can see a lot more presence on this one. And then here it is next to the Batavi Geograph. You can see just another different style of GMT here, with this being a world timer, and we did check this one out previously as well. But that gives you an idea there for sizing and just the overall presence and feel and vibe. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. First, for the positives, I've got to say, I think this dial is absolutely gorgeous. I really love this one. I love the silvery hue that this gets to it, depending on how it's in the light. Sometimes it looks like just a plain white. Other times, it really picks up that silver, but very delicate silver. It's almost like a pearlescence that picks up in terms of color. That's great. The movement I found to be excellent so far. As I already talked about in manipulation, that's great. This actually has one of the best for GMT function that I have ever felt on any watch. Let's check that out. It's hard to pick up on camera, but it just goes so smoothly and just clicks so nicely into place. I actually like that much better than the ETA 2893 that's in that Horizons over there. So that's really excellent there, and I'm pleased with that one. The bracelet comfort, as we talked about in the prior, you would be remiss if you were doing a spearfish video and not talking about that bracelet comfort. It is just phenomenal. From the female end link to the overall articulation, the small links, all that kind of good stuff. Really, really like that. Very pleased. And then with the bracelet, as well as the case itself, that hardened coating, excellent addition. Keep it looking new longer. I like that a lot. The finishing itself, it's part of the reason why it's good to have that hardened coating on there is because finishing actually looks really good. So I want to keep that looking like it does when it's brand new. And at the $850 price point that this one comes in at, it's certainly, I think it is punching per the class, especially with that movement, actually undercuts a lot of others, but I realize it's getting on the higher side for many people out there with your budget. So do know you do get the finishing that pays off for that. As far as the movement change as well, you lose the rotor noise that you had on the prior with being a unidirectional rotor on that LJP movement, similar to the Miyotas. This has a bidirectional, so you do lose that rotor noise. And then the sapphire bezel insert, that is something I actually really like a lot on this. I think it classes it up a lot, and I think that is a better design attribute than on the prior version with its brushed ceramic for that. I think they could have gone to a polished ceramic rather, and that would have looked good as well. But I like the sapphire choice. As for the critiques, the thickness I really don't think is bad overall. However, it is definitely something that, in my opinion, is a detractor from the prior version. I did prefer the slimness of the prior version. It was about 2 millimeters, I believe, slimmer. But again, we'll talk about that in the other video. But I haven't found this to be bad in usage. And if there wasn't an original spearfish, then it's not something I'd really be beating up. However, because there is, I know it, and ultimately I've got to bring it up. The GMT hand, some people talked about the legibility here. It is definitely on the thin side. I think possibly on camera, it has more contrast in person, I think, than it does on camera, but you can see it kind of does blend in a little bit there. And with being so slim and delicate, it actually kind of looks like the second hand absent the color change there. So at a quick glance, certainly it is not the easiest for legibility, and I wouldn't mind if they had broadened that out a little bit or otherwise modified that hand to make it a little more legible, but really not too bad. And then the clasp, as far as the manipulation, I've got to say I actually preferred the one on the Aurora for manipulation. I just found it to be a little easier to hit into a specific slot. So if I'm trying to do just a single adjustment click, I find this to be a little bit harder than the Aurora was, but it's still an excellent clasp. And aesthetically, I actually really like this one a lot. It does sit a little bit proud here. I don't love that lip on it, but that's part of the nature of toolless unless you have kind of turned down there. But the polish accents, the pebble texture, all that kind of stuff, I really like this clasp a lot outside of that one minor critique for that. So I really would like to kind of hybridize the Aurora and the Batiste version. I think if they could do that, that would be phenomenal. So where does that leave us overall? At the end of the day, I really like the original Spearfish, and this one's been no exception. I think for the most part, they actually improved on the original, the sapphire insert. Some of it, personally, I think the dial finishing is a little more aesthetically pleasing. The total package, I think, is really excellently done once again. The price point, as we talked about, I think you get your money's worth, but certainly it isn't going to be the cheapest in the world either. So you have to be looking a little more upmarket for many people out there that are in the micro brand space. The finishing overall is excellent, like I talked about. The one real detractor for me versus the prior variant is the total thickness. I do wish that they had kicked that up. Otherwise, this one would be an absolute slam dunk in my book, and no question, I would prefer this to the original. Even with the thickness, I've still got to say, I like the finishing in the total packaging well enough that despite the fact that I don't really have a need for a GMT, this still would get the nod from me. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did like it, please do smash that like button. Additionally, if you haven't done so already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.